Darren and I talk to farmers almost every day about soil tests, soil test results, fertilizer recommendations, and what we always say is, hey, this fertility thing is a really big deal. It's so important because you're going to probably in your lifetime spend at least hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars on fertilizer. What we want you to do is to know how to read that soil test so you have a better idea how to invest your dollars wisely so you can make as much money on your farm as possible. Well, today we want to talk about simplifying that soil test and look at just some basic soil conversions. Let's start with the parts per million to pounds per acre conversion.
Well, for most folks, and maybe you're one of them, that looks at a soil test, you think this is a big math problem. There really isn't a whole lot of math, as Brian said. There's just a few things that you need to kind of keep in mind here. And the first one would be when you see numbers that are shown as parts per million, how do you turn them into pounds per acre? With most soil tests, they're going to represent 6 inches of soil. And in every 3 inches of soil across 1 acre, there's roughly 1,000,000 pounds. So if you have a 6-inch soil test, you've got roughly a representation of 2 million pounds of soil. So when you see parts per million on a soil test, all you have to do on a 6-inch soil test is multiply that times 2 to get pounds per acre.
Now let's say you had a 12-inch soil core. Well, that's representing 4 million pounds, so you just take your parts per million number times 4 and so on. The reason why this is so important is because, let's face it, as farmers, we don't farm in parts per million. We don't buy our fertilizer in parts per million. We buy pounds. We're looking for pounds per acre. Now here's the next thing that you may not have even thought of before with potassium. Okay, let's say you have 0060. All right, everybody knows about potash, it's 0060. But is it really 0060? You know what that 60% is? It's actually K2O potassium. So if your soil test says potassium, that's not K2O. Here's what I mean. Let's say that the soil test says 100 parts per million of potassium. Well, in order to convert that over to K2O potassium, you'd have to multiply that times 1.2. So your 100 becomes 120 parts per million of K2O potassium. So again, potash isn't actually 0060 for potassium. That 60% is K2O potassium. It's only 50% actual potassium.
Phosphorus is another one, Brian, to convert to phosphate that you really need to understand. And like I said, to start this off, there's just a few mathematical calculations you need to know, and you can be a soil test whiz. For phosphorus, to convert to phosphate, you just multiply that times 2.3. So if you have 20 parts per million of phosphorus times 2.3, that's going to be 46 parts per million of phosphate.
Now the reason why that's important is because you don't buy phosphorus fertilizer. You say, what? Yes, I do. Of course I buy phosphorus fertilizer. I buy MAP or DAP every year. Well, MAP or DAP is phosphate. When we say 18460 or 1152O, that 46 and that 52, those numbers in the middle, they're not phosphorus. Those are phosphate numbers. And I realize if this is the first time you're hearing this, maybe you're a young farmer or maybe you don't even farm and you go, boy, this really sounds confusing. Look, if let's say I owned a soil lab, how would I represent everything? It'd be in pounds, it'd be in K2O potassium, it'd be in phosphate. But for whatever reason, soil labs don't do it that way. So we're just telling you, hey, let's just convert the phosphorus, real simple to do, like Darren said, multiply times 2.3. Now you get phosphate pounds, and now we're all talking the same language.
All right, the last one, Brian, again, here's another one to get to the 8. We have sulfur to sulfate. What's the calculation?
All right, pretty simple again. You just take your sulfur number times 3, and that will give you sulfate. So if you had, let's say, 10 pounds of sulfur in your soil, well, you actually have 30 pounds of sulfate in your soil. So it just depends on how you're buying your fertilizer, what it is. And again, the reason why we're bringing this up, and I know it sounds a little confusing and you're going, oh my goodness, I got to have somebody else do all this for me. No, these are about the only calculations that we ever even use. So again, it's parts per million to pounds per acre. Just multiply times 2 if it's a 6-inch test. If it's K to K2O, just multiply times 1.2 to get your potassium numbers over to K2O potassium. For phosphorus, you take your phosphorus number times 2.3 to get phosphate. And for sulfur, just multiply that one times 3 to get the sulfate.
Well, soil tests may seem a little bit complicated to you, but weed control is straightforward. We'll give you the straightforward answers on how to stop our weed of the week coming up next.